Hey guys, thanks for joining us here again at Salty Ginger Talk. Welcome back. Glad to have you. So, today we're talking about ways to build relationships. So, when I look at society now, I think, and this is no front page news, this is certainly not a deep thought by me. I think you've probably heard this a lot, but I agree with it 100%. We, through technology, have become much more distant, and it's become much harder for young people or people who didn't grow up way back in the day, like the rest of us, Gen Xers and Boomers, and so on and so forth. When you had to work to communicate with people, there wasn't a quick text or a cell phone call or those types of things. It was hard work to actually develop relationships and meet and talk to people. And I think technology has really diminished a lot of those skills. So today, I thought it'd be a good idea to say, okay, so um, how could I develop my relationships better? How can I try to develop better relationships, whether it be personal relationships, whether it be work relationships, whatever the case may be, whatever those relationships are that are important to you. Um, how do you strengthen them? How does it work? What's a good way to go about that? Because those of us who've been around a while have learned from trial and error, and sometimes things went great, sometimes it didn't go so great. But you learn how that works, and you learn techniques that really help you kind of develop relationships with people. And so we're gonna talk through seven of those today. There's certainly lots of different ways to do it, and before we even get into those, the first thing I always tell people is just be yourself. You don't have to be the life of the party. You don't have to be super outgoing. You don't have to be crazy insightful. You don't have to talk a lot. You don't have to enjoy drinking and dancing and yelling and all sorts of things that seem like they're things you need to do to be popular. It's just false. It's just not true. People like genuine people. And there's all sorts of different genuine types of people. Some people are very quiet and studious. Some people are really rambunctious in life at the party. If that's really who you are, people will see it and they're okay with it. They'll learn to deal with it. I can tell you from me personally, I'm loud, I'm direct. And when I direct is a kind of a polite way of saying, I can say shit right to people's faces that most people wouldn't say right to other people's faces. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's not so good. Sometimes it's well received, and sometimes you come off like a real jerk because you're being a real jerk. But that's who I am, and I have learned over the years that most people will accept that. Now I've also learned to do it in a way that they will accept it. So there's no reason to be, directly insulting to people or to intentionally insult people. And we'll cover some of that in here too. But the first and by far most important way to build a good relationship is just be yourself. And the people who want to be friends with a person like you will find you. I know it doesn't seem like it sometimes. I know it seems difficult sometimes, but you just got to keep putting yourself out in situations, and sometimes it'll work out. Sometimes it won't. You got to be okay with that. You got to be able to pick yourself up and say, well, I didn't go the way I wanted it to, but I'm going to try it again over here with this group of people or in this particular activity or at this workplace, whatever the case may be. So, with that said, be yourself. Number one, just be yourself. It's okay to be yourself. It's good to be yourself. Everybody else is taken, right? You're the only one that can be you. So, why don't you just do that? And things typically work out pretty well for people that are genuine. That's a good way to think about it. So, yeah, unless you're like, Satan reincarnated, and then you're probably a sociopath and you're pretending to be someone else anyway, so you're on your own. Can't help you there. But for the rest of us normal humans, being yourself is a good thing. So, first one I have is take the hit. So, if you want to develop a good relationship with someone, step in and help them out when they're having a problem. It's kind of the first rule of leadership that I talk about with people. And the way I explain it to people is you, as the leader, have to accept all the criticism and deflect all the praise. So, what do I mean when I say that? So, if someone says, you know what, your group is not cutting it, they're not getting their work done, this isn't happening, that isn't happening, the best approach is not to say, well, yeah, Steve isn't getting it done, or Betty's showing up late for work, or Jeff isn't paying attention, or Sarah isn't contributing the way she's supposed to. The best thing you can do in those situations as a leader and say is to acknowledge, and let's assume you agree with it, acknowledge it and say, okay, yep, got it. That's on me. It's my group. I'm the leader. I'm going to rally the troops. I'm going to pull everyone together, and you're going to see some improvement from us immediately. You've got my word on it. So that's a way to take the hit, right? That's a way to say, and even if it is Steve or Jeff or Sarah or Betty or whoever the problem is, don't air your dirty laundry. Don't throw people under the bus. Take the hit as the leader, and then go back to the group, have a private conversation with people that need a private conversation, and be direct and honest with them. They might not like it, but they'll respect you for it, and you're going to have a good relationship with that person because they know you're going to tell them the truth, and they know they can count on what you say being honest, and they know where they stand with you. And that's what most people actually want. They really want to know where they stand with you. So it's a good way to do it. And even when it's not your fault, in a personal relationship, just step in. If someone gets pulled over, to tell the police officer, "Oh man, I'm sorry, I was distracted them while they were driving. That's my fault. I got to do a better job." Or somebody trips and falls, and you say, "Oh man, I'm sorry, I saw that there, and I should have moved. That's my fault. I'm really sorry." That takes the onus off of someone else and shows that you're willing to step in and you've got their back. And when things are tough or when things are awkward, they know they can count on you. And that's a good way to build kind of some personal capital with whoever it is that you're trying to develop a relationship with. So don't be afraid to step in and take some of the heat off of people because it's a good way to go. Number 2, step in without being asked. So when you can see someone is struggling, they look lost, they look confused, you can tell they've got too much on their plate. You can tell something's bothered them. Just step in. Don't even ask them so you see someone carrying a bunch of stuff up to their apartment. Grab a couple of bags and help them out. Don't be a creeper. Now I know where you live, that type of stuff. But if someone's lifting something heavy, grab the other end of it. If someone's pushing a car because it broke down, get out and help them push it to the side of the road. Step in without being asked. Step in and give people help when they need help. If you see someone struggling to walk down the street because they're carrying something heavy, just grab a bag and say, "Hey, I'm heading this way anyways. Let me help you out until you get to where you're going." Those are great ways to develop relationships. If you got a friend that's moving, don't ask them if they need help. They say they're moving Saturday, just show up. Show up and help them move. Those are good ways to go. They're working on a resume. Come over, grab whatever, a bottle of wine, a box of crackers, and say, "Hey, let's work on your resume together. I just got done looking for a job, and it's tough work. I can help you out and share some of the things I learned because I just got done screwing all this up on my own." That's another good way to develop a relationship. Ask or answer. So moving on, ask or answer leading questions. Because it gets people thinking and talking. So leading questions are where you can't respond yes or no. So boy, it's sure hot, isn't it? They're going to say yes. They're going to say no. Say, boy, you grew up here. Do you remember what summers were like as a kid? What were summers like as a kid when you were here? They're going to say more than yes or no to that question. You go to a new restaurant. Boy, the food is good here, huh? Someone's going to say yes or someone's going to say no. What did you order? What was your favorite part of it? What did you like about it? Those are leading questions that are going to get people to talk. And I can tell you, I have 3 sons. I raised 3 sons, and I told them very early on, if you want to be successful with women, ask them questions about themselves and then shut your mouth. Because everybody likes to talk about themselves. And by the way, women, that same thing works with men. And I think most of you know it because you're better in general at developing relationships than men are. But men develop man-to-man relationships are very different because there's a lot of teasing and kind of machismo that goes with that. But you can develop good relationships with men that way. My 3 sons are all adults now, and they love giving me shit, rightfully, because it wasn't all rainbows and unicorns growing up in our house. But we've got a good relationship, and they know that they can say, "Hey, you're not doing this very well right now," or "Yeah, this is a fault of yours, and we'd like to give you some shit about it." And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But asking those leading questions, asking people to talk, people are almost always going to answer those questions, and they're going to say more than just yes or no. And it gives you information. And then you can ask a follow-up question. So, someone says, "Oh, I remember as a kid, we used to go swimming in Lake Erie," and blah, 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 whatever the case may be. And you could follow it up with, Man, really? Have you seen any changes in that? Are there people that still swim in Lake Erie? Is it harder to do now? Right? So you can kind of continue on a conversation there. You can kind of always leads to another question when you're asking those questions. The other thing is when people ask a question, try to think about why they're asking you that question, right? Because the question they ask might not necessarily be the one they want an answer to. So someone says, what does it take to open a successful business? To like me, I've started several businesses, and what does it take to open a successful business? Maybe they actually want to know, or maybe they want a pep talk. Maybe they want someone to say, you can do it. You just have to bust your ass, and you have to solve problems. You have to not give up, and you're capable of doing it. You're smart. You're a hard worker. You've got some chutzpah. You'll get it done. Maybe that's what they're looking for. So try to think about why it is they're asking you the questions that they're asking, and help them, kind of work through those things together. And then this next one is the exact opposite. Know when to shut up. A lot of times there are situations where people just want to vent. People just have had a bad day. They've had a bad experience. They're not sure about what the next step is, and they're just trying to work through things out loud. And you don't need to always contribute. It doesn't need to be about you. You don't need to share, oh, I know exactly what that's like because I had similar experience X. Nobody cares sometimes. Sometimes the best thing to do is just say, man, that's really tough. I'm sorry you're going through that. Oh man, that's hard. I hope you can get it done. Or I know you can get it done, whatever the case may be. Kind of the best way I've heard this described, so James Clear wrote a book about habits. It's called Atomic Habits. It's a great book. If you haven't read Atomic Habits, I highly recommend it. And he's got a newsletter. And I don't remember this being in the book, but it certainly was in his newsletter. And it's a great approach to trying to decide if you should or should not comment on a particular question, a particular situation, or in a particular conversation. And he says, ask yourself 3 questions. And if the answer to all 3 of these questions is yes, go ahead and say what you're going to say. But if the answer to any one of these questions is no, then you should just shut your mouth and let things play out. The first question is, does this need to be said? A lot of times we just have an offhand comment. We want to share our opinion. We want to be funny. We want to sound cool, whatever the case may be. And there's a time and a place for that. That's okay. But there's also a time and a place for that not to happen. And so if the answer to that question is no, stop. You don't need to ask the next 2 questions. Just keep your mouth shut. And a lot of times just being there and being supportive without contributing is really super helpful to people because they know you've got their back. You're not going to run, but you're not trying to step in and run their life or solve their problems. Okay? So question 2 is, does this need to be said by me? So are you the right person to step in and say something? And I would offer this up in a lot of relationships where someone is complaining about their spouse, someone is complaining about their partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever the case may be. Is it your place to step in and make a comment on the inner workings or dynamics of that particular relationship? I would argue a lot of times the answer to that question is no, and you should just be quiet. You don't need to contribute. You don't need to say something in those situations. You should just shut your mouth. And then, so let's say you've said, yes, this needs to be said. And yes, this needs to be said by me. Number 3 is, does this need to be said by me right now? And I think that's a great way to think about it because even though you may have the thought, even though your thought may be correct, even though you may have absolutely diagnosed the situation correctly, you may have it nailed. You may have all the answers. You may know exactly how things would work out. And you've solved the Rubik's Cube. You've got the answer to the riddle. If someone's not in a position mentally or emotionally to listen to and receive that answer, it's not going to be effective. And you could even piss them off. And then they wouldn't listen to you down the road no matter what. So if the answer to that 3rd question is no, shut your mouth, right? So those are good ways to think about whether you should or should not get involved in or participate in a conversation. And if you really think about that, it's going to help you develop a good relationship with whoever that person is because, again, they know that they can count on you. They know that you're genuinely interested and you're reading the tea leaves correctly, and they know they can involve you in issues or problems or come to you with issues or problems and get honest feedback without being judged, without being insulted, without being made to feel bad because you're making shitty comments about whatever the situation is. So, yeah, know when to shut up. So, number 5, apologize when you're wrong and do it before anyone asks you to do it. I can't stress this one enough. And I'm really good at this one because I've screwed up a lot of stuff in my life. And again, I said earlier in this podcast, I will say things to people that most people wouldn't say directly to their face. The stuff that people would say behind their backs, the stuff that people would say online because they're, a keyboard warrior or they're, really tough behind their computer screen. I, even as a kid, have always been willing to say those things directly to people. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's not good. Sometimes I got my ass kicked. Sometimes it worked out really well for me. But because of that, I've been in situations where it's pretty obvious that when I make a comment or I make a statement, pretty immediately I know, ooh, that went bad. That was not well received. That was not the intention I was looking for. That did not land the way I wanted it to land. Just apologize. And apologize unequivocally. When I say unequivocally, don't say, I'm sorry, but I thought. Nobody gives a shit. All they want to know is that you recognize that you handled that situation incorrectly. It was not well received, and you want them to give you a do-over. And the best way to do that is to issue an unequivocal apology. So I can't stress that enough. And the last thing on this subject that I will say is only apologize when you're sorry. Don't apologize to appease somebody. If you disagree and if they're upset, it's okay to disagree. There's nothing in the world that says you have to find common ground with every single person you deal with on every single issue you talk about. It's okay to agree to disagree. And if you apologize when you're not sorry, it will come across as disingenuous and people won't put any merit into an actual apology. People generally forgive me very quickly because I apologize unequivocally. And I will say, I apologize when I'm sorry. And I'm not sorry for what I just said, so it's too bad that hurts your feelings or upsets you, but that's a you problem, not a me problem. Believe it or not, people will respect you, and it's a good way to develop relationships because they know you're willing to look them in the eye and tell them the hard truth that a lot of other people are not willing to tell them. And I say that to my family and my boys in particular a lot. I used to tell my boys growing up, it's not my job to be your friend. It's not my job to be your pal. It's my job to be your dad. And I love you enough to tell you the truth. And a lot of people say they love you or they care about you and they won't tell you the truth. I call bullshit. They don't love you if they're not really willing to have a hard conversation with you. And it's interesting to see that my boys have all grown up to be men that will have what they consider hard conversations with me. So they'll challenge me when they think I'm wrong. And that's awesome. That's awesome. It's a sign of a really strong relationship from my perspective. So I think it's great. Number 6, give more than you take. So if you are a time sucker or an energy sucker or a resource sucker, or you've always got to make it about you and you've always got to have things so that you're the center of attention or you're focused on your problems or your challenges or your life and everything that's going on in it, that gets old, man. Like it just gets old for anybody. And so I would think you want to think about, in a relationship, you want to be the person that gives more than they receive. I follow this a lot. I never ever want to feel like I owe somebody anything. And so I'm not a big present guy. I'm not a big let you pay for dinner guy. I tend to do all of those things because I don't want to feel beholden to someone down the road. And, you can look at our political system right now and say, hey, there's plenty of people that don't feel that way because a lot of politicians are beholden to special interest groups and deep-pocketed donors and lobbyists. And like, that's just not a good way to be. That's a good way to think about it from a relationship perspective. Those donors that give a lot, they own those politicians. And I would much rather in those situations be the donor than the politician. So if you want to develop strong relationships where people really want to be around you and care about you and care what you think and really want, to keep that strong relationship with you, give more than you take. Don't get used. You can tell the difference when someone's using you, when someone actually is getting a lot out of their relationship with you. So don't get used. But you should give more than you take. You should put into the relationship more then you get out of it. And that's typically going to lead to very strong relationships. Because if both people are doing that, look at how much both people are bringing to the table. And that's a great place to be. That's when two people genuinely care about each other and have a good relationship. And the last one, this one seems really basic, but it's really important. Treat people like they matter, because they do. Nobody is below you. No, you're not too good for anything. I can tell you that I started, when I've had a job since I was 12 years old. I started mowing lawns, and then I washed trucks at a company my dad worked at. I've cleaned toilets. I've counted bottles. I've shoveled shit. I've done any menial job you can think of. I happen to be a CEO now, and I happen to have a lot of kind of high profile, big projects on my plate, but that doesn't make me any better than the people that are doing the work on those projects. We've got electricians and plumbers and workers at our stores. They're all terribly important. They matter. They've got spouses, husbands and wives. They've got kids. They've got family members. They do a great job at what they do. They deal with our customers and to make our customers happy. Nobody's above you. Don't be a dick to a waiter or a waitress. Don't be a dick to the cashier at Starbucks because they got your order wrong or didn't understand it the first time. Just be a human being. Treat them with respect. Treat them like they matter. And if you do that with people, they're going to recognize it and you'll get credit for it. And you should get credit for it. It's not that hard just to be a decent human being. And again, that doesn't mean you don't challenge things when they're wrong. You just need to do it in a respectful way. There's no reason to call names. There's no reason to raise your voice. There's no reason to throw drinks at people or throw a big tantrum in the middle of a lobby. It's not effective. It makes people uncomfortable. It makes you look like an ass because you're being an ass. And if you just treat people with respect, most of the time things are going to go really well for you. So, yeah, guys, those are my 7 tips with the bonus tip at the beginning of just be yourself. And those are great tips that I have found through the years help me build and develop great relationships with the people that I interact with. And you're not always going to love everyone you interact with, but it's important to develop good relationships with them because if you're around them, it's typically because you've got a common goal or share a common interest. And it's important to be able to do that. So, yep, hope that's helpful, guys. Hope those are some tips you could put into practice in your day-to-day life. Developing relationships. Life is about relationships and experiences. It is not about money. It's not about material things. It's cool if you got a private jet. It's cool if you got a lot of bling. It's cool, all those things. But I'm telling you, as you get older, you'll realize, hey, none of this stuff means a goddamn thing. What really matters is the people that care about me, the people that I care about, and the experiences that I can have and share with those people. So focus on building good relationships with people. Take these items and put them into practice. And I think you're going to be much happier down the road than you are right now. Thanks a lot for coming back and joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk, guys. Don't forget to check out our website, saltygingertalk.com. We've got links to all our social accounts on there. We've got our newsletter on there. All of our podcasts are on there. And you can sign up to get our newsletter on a weekly basis. Thanks again for coming back and joining us. And we'll see you next time.